Habituation. The definition of habituation is the disappearance of responsiveness to accustomed stimulation. Basically, an animal stops reacting to something that has no effect on it. The evolutionary significance of habituation at an honors biology level is it allows an animal to adapt its behavior to fit into its environment or niche. And at AP Bio level, the evolutionary significance is that it allows an animal to balance its energy expenditure with its energy consumption by letting it not respond to stimuli that indicate neither food nor predators, which conserves energy. In humans, students stop responding to bells corresponding to lunches other than their own to conserve energy. This is controlled by the cerebellum, which is the part of the brain focused on motor control. For simple stimuli, once they are perceived, the signal stops reaching the brain, resulting in no behavioral response. For complex stimuli, the signal reaches and the cerebellum does not send a response signal to the muscles. An example in animals is prairie dogs living near human settlements or roads, and they stop letting out an alarm call when humans pass to conserve energy. Related experiments on animals are chimpanzees were exposed to a human and eventually learned to ignore or tolerate the human. Classical conditioning. The definition of classical conditioning is a form of associative learning where a neutral stimulus and an unconditional stimulus are pairs to produce a reflexive response regardless of the presence of an unconditional stimulus. An explanation of this is an unrelated noise, sight, or smell occurs at the same time as a reward, causing the animal to link the two and react to the unrelated thing. The evolutionary significance of this at an honors biology level is an animal can learn to associate the sight, sound, or smell of a predator to fear and motor responses. At an AP biology level, the evolutionary significance is that the animal, at an indicator of a predator, can learn to have a fight or flight response, resulting in the release of adrenaline to the liver to produce mass amounts of energy or ATP from stored saccharides to be used to escape the threat. In humans, a student hears a bell at the end of each class and begins associating it with rapid movement towards another class or towards home. The section of the brain used in this is the cerebellum, as this requires a motor response. The stimulus is sensed, and the signal moves to either the parietal lobes, temporal lobes, or the occipital lobes, then to the cerebellum, which initiates the muscular response. Related experiments are Pavlov rung a bell at the same time he fed a dog, so every time he rang the bell, the dog began to salivate. Watson and Rayner showed a child a rat at the same time ringing a bell to scare the child, and whenever the child saw a rat after that, he would get scared. Operant conditioning. The definition of operant conditioning is a type of associative learning where a target response is followed by a reinforced reward, making emission of the target response occur at a higher rate. The explanation of this is when a certain action is always followed by a reward, the probability of that action being repeated is significantly higher. The evolutionary significance of this at an honors biology level is, using this form of trial and error learning, animals can learn to avoid things that might cause pain. At an AP biology level, the evolutionary significance is an action causing a stimulus causes a signal to be sent to the brain, releasing neurotransmitters, which will signal another part of the brain to either repeat or cease the action, depending on whether the initial stimulus is rewarding or not, allowing the organism to avoid danger and acquire resources. In humans, this is shown when a student does well on a project. They receive praise from authority figures, so they are far more likely to do well on the next assignment to receive further praise. The section of the brain this is associated with is also the cerebellum, because it is another form of associative learning and works the same way. Related experiments are, Skinner placed a mouse in a box with an electric grid and a food dispenser. When the mouse pressed a button while one colored light was on, it would get shocked. When a different colored light was on and the button was pressed, food was dispensed. Imprinting. The definition of imprinting is a process where a young animal follows the characteristics of its mother after hatching. The evolutionary significance of this at an honors biology level is it allows an animal to form familial ties and receive care and protection from its mother. At an AP biology level, the evolutionary significance of this is the animal's mother can ward off predators, allowing the offspring to survive longer so as to have more chance to reproduce, thereby adding its traits to the gene pool, benefiting the organism, the parents, and usually the species. Related experiments to this are that young chicks and ducklings were imprinted on humans, wooden blocks, and other objects, and would follow them wherever they went. There is also sexual imprinting, in which an animal will have a preference for the animal or similar animals to the one it imprinted upon when it comes time for reproduce. Insight. The definition of insight is self-understanding as to the motives and reasons behind one's own actions or those of another's. Basically, being able to understand, reason, and use logic to learn. The evolutionary significance of insight at an honors biology level is that it allows an organism to reason through a problem, such as how to get food that is in a hard-to-reach place. At an AP biology level, insightful traits such as altruism and revenge can benefit the species. For example, altruism can help another animal survive, thus allowing them to add their genes to the gene pool and allowing the population to retain or increase size, while revenge deters competition for resources, thus letting an individual survive longer. In humans, the ability to reason through problems has allowed us to create tools and to discover beneficial technologies. It also helps with human interaction and the creation and use of actual language. The section of the brain used is the right anterior temporal lobe, which has been linked to both auditory and visual information as well as memory. Related experiments are, in a recent experiment done in Germany, objects were placed out of reach to a stretching adult, but in reach of either a young human or a chimpanzee, both would always pass the object, displaying the evolutionary development of insightful traits. Instinct. The definition of instinct is natural inward impulse towards any mode of action without distinct apprehension towards any specific result or any improvement upon the method. Basically, an animal does an action the same way without thinking about the outcome and without being taught the behavior. The evolutionary significance of this at an honors biology level is that it allows an animal to spend less time learning behaviors that will help it survive, just as the instinct to scare off rivals or predators. At an AP biology level, animals with certain instincts survive longer and reproduce more, as shown by betta fish and their fixed action patterns scaring off rivals, so they are more able to contribute to the gene pool and maintain or change allele frequencies. In humans, this is shown when students hear the late bell and they're in the hallways. Their instinct is to walk faster. The section of the brain that controls this is the amygdala, the section that receives sensory intakes. Sensory trigger received, it goes to the amygdala and then to the cerebellum, which triggers motor control or the fight or flight response. In animals, if a large object moves towards a mouse, the mouse will instinctively run from the large object. Related experiments towards this is, in 1951, Tinbergen used a cross to test what baby turkeys ran from. When the cross was tilted so it looked like a goose in flight, there was no response. When tilted so it looked like a hawk in flight, the turkeys ran and hid from the predators as a result of instinct.